Okay, so this is part two for the people watching it online. We've talked about the general environment and we've done our introduction about environmental scanning. Now we're going to look at the industry environment. So I mentioned earlier that there is a model of the industry environment that is called Porter's 5 Forces model. The reason for showing the previous video was to give you an idea of the links between the industry, and the competitor environment and the changes that can happen over time, which will fit into competitive dynamics in a later topic. The industry environment is the way that you look at how firms competing with each other within an industry, firms where the products would be seen as substitutes, compete with each other, how they influence each other, the behaviour, the strategy of each other, and how, with a mix of different types of competitive strategies these companies use, lead them to pursuing different strategic competitiveness and achieving different strategic competitiveness and above average returns. The industry environment is a more direct effect on the firm's strategic choices and whether they achieve above average returns. We saw things about competition in that. We saw Toyota creating in the Prius video. We saw Toyota creating Prius to create a new segment in the market. They expanded their hybrid technology later. They put themselves in the position of being this high-tech vehicle, this fuel-efficient vehicle. That was originally in response to pressures by the legal pressures from the external environment, by the government, for more fuel-efficient vehicles. And electrification seemed the way to go. Not in the video is the second part of the hybrid story, is fuel cell vehicles, where you use a hydrogen fuel cell to charge the battery. A hydrogen fuel cell to charge. And the outcome, what comes out of a hydrogen fuel cell? Water. Right? That's the emissions, is water. So there's already hydrogen fuel cell vehicles available. Hyundai's got them, Toyota's got them, but they had a problem rolling them out of the US. That is the alternative future to electric vehicles to meet emission standards. The hydrogen fuel cell vehicle is one of the reasons why Toyota's given away all its hybrid technology, because effectively hydrogen is just the fuel for a combustion engine with an output of air that charges batteries, so you have a battery electric vehicle. So they want to maintain the position of hybrid as a way of reducing emissions for a whole pile of other strategic reasons, but also for a future reason. Part of the issue with electric vehicles is that they use less parts, and the things that make current car companies strong don't make them strong in the future. So, and obviously now we have a competitive action by Tesla to enter the marketplace. We had other firms responding to the same general issues of reducing emissions in different ways. The big push in Europe to use diesel to reduce emissions, but some of them got caught out by cheating. Because there's a fleet average emissions process where you have to produce the average emissions of your fleet of vehicles that you sell to a particular level. Fiat and Chrysler were just buying other people's output to create this fleet average, to decrease their fleet average. They've had trouble selling electric vehicles. They've only just changed the strategy to make it real. BMW put a lot of effort into it and then had to change general manager and then stopped putting effort into it. It's only now coming back to putting effort into electric vehicles. General Motors, late to the game, so even though they had the Volt, are putting in a lot of effort. Because they realise that the pickup market is going to be the big electric market. One of the reasons that they have they've said they're going to reintroduce the Hummer, is that the Hummer truck platform already exists. It's a full chassis platform. Most of these things you hear in electric vehicles are called platforms or full chassis. And then you build a car on top of it. The Hummer platform, and therefore all the engineering related to the Hummer platform, already exists. And the other thing about the Hummer is it was designed to have, if necessary for the military market, heavy-weight shielding, steel, but effectively steel, thick steel, to protect people against 4 or 5 inch thick steel, 7 inch thick steel plates to protect people from explosive devices. So so there's already a place to slide in the original design to slide batteries in. So a lot of the delay they've had in production of not investing, they'll be able to catch up because they've already got the vehicle design. They just have to get their drive chain sorted. Okay? So different firms responding to an external pressure in the industry in different ways. Different firms achieving above average returns. The 5 forces model of the industry environment is a way to look at how the forces external to the company impact on industry profitability. The 5 forces are rivalry among competing firms, threat of new entrants, bargaining power of suppliers, bargaining power of buyers, and threat of substitute products. Threat of new entrants is influenced by the nature of the barriers to entry. There are effectively 8 main barriers to entry: economies of scale, product differentiation, capital requirements, switching costs, access to distribution channels, cost disadvantages independent of scale, government policy, and the expected retaliation in your market if you enter their market. So, let's look at economies of scale first. Economies of scale are improvements that you gain from being bigger because you've moved along the experience curve. You move along the experience curve, you become more experienced in the manufacturing, more experienced in the service delivery, more experienced in everything, so therefore you get an advantage. That's one form of economies of scale. Another form of economies of scale is that you've got this great big company, and if someone else wants to enter the marketplace and be competitive, they have to be large. So if you need to have economy of scale to enter the marketplace, the size of your organisation, the existing organisations, means that people have to come in and invest in the same way, so that acts as a barrier to entry. But wait, that's not always the case. If we think about the telecommunications market, we have a dominant telco, maybe 1 or 2, and then we have a lot of smaller ones that are competitive, aren't they? Because even though economies of scale give one set of advantage, there are other things that might give advantage. In the airline industry, it's costly. You never have more than 2 full-service airlines in Australia because of the size of the market and the size of the existing companies. But there are other companies that are able to enter the market in niche positions. There are virtual airlines. They don't own their planes, they don't own their staff, they don't own anything, but they do sell flights. Yeah. I shouldn't have walked away from the microphone for that example. I forgot that I was recording, and I'm sick of sitting down. I'm back. So airlines, economies of scale acting as a barrier. Product differentiation. Product differentiation creates customer loyalty. People are loyal to Coca-Cola or BMW or Mini or whatever. They create that customer loyalty acts as a barrier to entry. If you think about the way that and some of you are too young for this, but if you think about the way that Hyundai has grown to being a full competitor with all the other big companies. Hyundai, when it came at first, was producing low-cost small cars. Then they started producing cars that appeared to have the same level of features, or even sometimes more features, than Toyota. But they were cheaper.
And they have extended the warranty period as well.
Yeah, they had a longer warranty, so they had a better warranty than their competitors.
Yes.
And over time they became a competitor, but they had to enter the market against a large incumbent, and they had to learn how to be in that market. They just had a lot of money to do it because Hyundai is a giant company outside of car manufacturing. There are other parts of Hyundai. But that entry in the market took effectively 15 to 20 years, and you can still have conversations with people where they will say, well, in one strategic group you've got Toyota and Nissan and companies like that, the Japanese companies, and then the Korean companies are low-cost companies. When in fact by now the two big Korean brands compete pretty directly with the main brands, and it's the new Chinese brands that are lower cost. And just like Lexus enter, I'm doing a lot because it's an all-male room. I'm doing a lot of car examples. I know that's a bit gendered, but still, Lexus saw the opportunity to compete with BMW and Mercedes. But is a Lexus as good as a BMW? Quick poll. Who thinks a Lexus is as good as a BMW? Nobody in this room. I could go to another room and they go, yes, it is, it's better. Right? Who thinks that a Mini is a cool car? Raise your hand if you think Mini is a cool car. One person. So one sensible person. Do you have a Samsung phone? No? Oh, halfway there. So, people buy Minis even though they're more expensive than a similarly featured car.
But it is made by BMW.
Yes, it's made by BMW and it's built in England. But it's also built in, now, China. Right? People buy Volvos all the time. Volvos are manufactured in Thailand.
Where is it?
Right? So, product differentiation, product competitiveness. Create customer loyalty and give you above average returns. Capital requirements. You may need to invest a lot to enter a market. That creates a barrier. You may need to have a large amount of stock to be able to meet the market. Large inventories, large ranges of service and support. The size of the extent of marketing you have to do to compete with the existing players, you need availability of capital. Those can act as barriers to entry. Switching costs to get a customer from switching from one system to another system. So we'll do the quick quest. How many people have iPhones in this room? How many people have Android phones in this room? What have you got? iPhone. So 4 iPhones, 1 Android phone. How many people using iPhones would change to an Android phone? You're using an Android phone, aren't you? How many people with an iPhone would change? Nobody. How many people with an Android phone in this room would change to an iPhone? Do you have an Android phone?
I had before.
Yeah?
Then I changed it to the...
Was it a hassle? Yeah. That's why people don't change. Because you're committed to your different stores, the different apps, the different ways of doing it. The fact that Samsung's so much better than iPhone. All those type of things. Right? Okay. Okay. In an industrial environment, you may have to retrain employees to use a different computer system or a different technology or a different machine. You might have to train your customers to do things differently. And you're in a way ending this relationship. Like I really, I really don't like Apple. I mean, I've never liked Apple. I didn't like Apple when I had to use Apple computers. When I was younger, I really, they're more expensive and less powerful. But they do create a walled garden. They do have great service structure. They do have a ability to make themselves appear as if they've invented things that others have had for ages. I can understand why people like it. I just don't. And I can see no way that I would use that I'd ever buy an Apple PC for myself, a Mac Pro for myself. Because why would I spend $700 more, $900 more than the equivalent Surface or HP or Samsung? I wouldn't. But then I've just bought a Mac Pro for my son, switching the other way because he's in a Mac environment and he's in an Apple environment. So it's just the way it is. It's switching costs, but there is a psychic disconnect. Access to distribution channels, they may act as barriers. You may not be able to sell through the existing network. There might already be an existing network that has complete ties to one company. Cost disadvantages, if you're establishing an airline in Australia in the past, well, Qantas and Ansett used to own the airports. There was no space. Cost disadvantage, things like access to technology or raw materials or locations or government subsidies that act as barriers. So all those things can act as barriers, as can government policy and the belief that if you enter someone else's market, they'll enter you, the retaliation. That's the first force in Porter's 5 forces. The second force in Porter's 5 forces is bargaining power of suppliers. The power of the supplier over the company. That's what that means. The power of the supplier over the company. If you have something, there's few suppliers and you must buy from them. Or if there aren't alternate products, you have to buy from them. And your industry might not be a significant customer for that supplier, so they don't care about you. And they're critical to your goals. You must have that. And they pose a threat of high switching costs. And there's a risk that if you stop buying from them, they'll enter your marketplace and compete with them. That gives power of suppliers. Even large companies, even companies you seem as super successful, have issues like that. Currently, the manufacturer of Snapdragon's chips, the computer chip that's used in they're not the manufacturer, the designer, that's used in iPhones and almost every other mobile device, right? Unlike every other chip manufacturer, they want a percentage. They won't sell to you unless you're given a percentage of the retail price of the product. And as Apple built its ecosystem around Snapdragon, Apple doesn't design anything except things that look pretty. They don't, and service and support. They don't design the technology really. They are committed to that, and they feel they're being price gouged, but they have to use that company. Now, as a matter of course, a significant proportion of Snapdragon chips are manufactured by Samsung microprocessors, the Samsung chip company, the biggest chip company in the world. If you look at a Galaxy 10, a Galaxy 20, a Galaxy 9, which is one of the... Samsung have two premium brands, Galaxy and Note. In the US, they have Snapdragon chips. In the rest of the world, they have Exynos chips. So the royalty doesn't have to be paid to Snapdragon, the company that makes Snapdragon. The company that owns the intellectual property of Snapdragon. So, and it would appear that there's a two-pronged attack happening at the moment of Apple and other phone companies trying to force, taking antitrust actions against Snapdragon that might work in a US domestic setting and force them to reduce their pricing, change their pricing, predatory pricing. But at the same time, Snapdragon's running this social media campaign. I would assume it's Snapdragon, that apparently there's this groundswell of customers in Asia and Australia and Europe who are dissatisfied with the fact that Samsung phones in the rest of the world have the Samsung Epinus chip because it's not as good. I have not seen anywhere except in these social media tech reports any groundswell of customers saying that. It's still the number one sell. The launch has been spectacularly successful. People don't care. But this company sees a real risk, particularly if Apple decide, well, we're going to move to the another strategic alliance with Samsung. Because Samsung make a significant proportion of the components for Apple, for iPhones. Okay. So those things give suppliers power. The supplier has power if they have something that meets those criteria or some of those criteria. Buyers have power when they're large and few in number, where they purchase a large proportion of the industry's output, where the buyers purchase a significant portion of the supplier's annual revenue, where the buyers can switch easily, and where there's a threat to backward integration. So let's think about Woolworths and Coles, the two biggest liquor companies in Australia, the two biggest liquor retailers in Australia. They own hotels, they own off-licenses, they own direct retail sales. They have about 60% of the packaged alcohol market. So therefore they are buyers from the wine and liquor industry with a lot of power, aren't they? That makes sense. And that power is even greater because Woolworths and Coles both backwardly integrate. Woolworths and Coles both own breweries. Pardon? They both own breweries where beer's made. They both own breweries. They both own brewery brands. They both own their own brands of wine, and they decide how things are distributed in the store. So they have an enormous power over those companies. If you want to know whether a wine is a Woolworths wine, a Woolworths own brand, it's 535 Wellington Road. 535 Wellington Road is the address of Woolworths State Distribution Centre. And on wine and on alcohol, they've got to put the address of the company on it. So they put 535. They don't say Woolworths. That says, Furphy Beer, 535. Right? So they have power over their buyers because they have backward integrated and they have their own brands and they do. One of the reasons that Aldi's, we're going to break in 2 minutes. One of the reasons that Aldi's, we're going to pause in 2 minutes at the end of the slide. One of the reasons that Aldi's address is Great Western, is Minchinbury, is because a giant distribution centre of one of the wine companies went broke, largely because of Woolworths and Coles' behaviour. So they have this major distribution centre at Minchinbury, which Aldi bought cheaply. And that's why, okay. So, power of buyers. We will take another break now before we do the third part of the session. Students that are here in class, take a 10-minute break. And then we'll come back and do the last half hour.